First Things First is sponsored by Gillette, the best a man can get.
Back here, First Things First. We're now joined by FS1 NBA analyst Sarah Cruz.
What's up? How are you? Bad influence on her. Yes. Now we got donuts and everything.
I was so impressed you ate some
her
donuts.
girlish figure.
That I ate some donuts.
You ate one bite of a donut?
Yes.
I was sitting there the whole. I watch you guys every morning.
As well, you should.
And I'm looking at this.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at this. CC thinks I'm lying. I'm totally serious. But I was looking at the entire box of donuts sitting there, and I was like, how are you all focused talking to one another about whatever it is we're talking about, not eating the donuts?
Raptors.
We did.
That's how.
Absolutely. And Jenna, it was easy for her to say no because yesterday was the first time she's ever tasted a donut.
That is not true,
it was. Well, I'm just talking about your own words, Jenna.
Oh,
your own words.
I just couldn't remember the last time. Nick polished off the rest of the donut. The off-season Sarah Kustok came early for the Houston Rockets, at least earlier than they would have liked. They lost in 6 to the Warriors in the Western Conference semifinals. After the game, CP3 and Harden reportedly had an exchange of words in the locker room concerning the Rockets' offense and concerning ball movement. Paul reportedly had passionate discussions with head coach Mike D'Antoni throughout the season, expressing his concerns about Houston's offense. Sarah, what do you make of all this, and did it affect what we ended up seeing at the end of the season?
Well, frankly, I'm surprised that we didn't see some of this sooner. I mean, considering the fact we had so much dialogue and the narrative about do we aesthetically like how James Harden plays. We know how efficient he is. We know how he's able to score in isolation. But as a player, that's, if you're a teammate, not necessarily a fun brand of basketball to say, you guys spread out, you stay in the corners, be ready for a kick out. There was not a whole lot of touches on the ball. Houston last in the league in assist percentage, and a lot of the things that you see in watching players finding joy in how they play is because of ball movement. And so I think with Chris Paul, we understand the talents and the success he's had throughout the course of his career and what he does predicated on the pass and on finding teammates. And so I don't know what they do from here, but I think there's a lot of serious questions because it's not only about the roster, it's not only about personnel, but it is about does this style find success and get you to where you want to go when you're playing in the postseason.
I think they found this style by accident, though. I don't think the coach, I don't think the organization, when they set out, even with James Harden and Chris Paul, to play together, that Harden would have the ball as much as he did. It evolved into this because last year in the playoffs, Chris Paul, they felt like at this age, he got worn out. That's why his hamstring went on him. So they were like, if we had Chris Paul back. So now you know what their goal was this year? It wasn't to win games. It was to get to the playoffs with Chris Paul being healthy. So in doing that, James Harden started holding the ball a little bit more, controlling the offense. And then James Harden, because his commitment to his body, he got hot in a way that system just mushroomed because he was thriving in it. No one had ever seen Houston play that way before. So in trying to preserve Chris Paul's body to get him to the playoffs, they created this monster in James Harden having one of the best offensive seasons that we ever seen. Now, when they were playing that way, no one had calculated, can you win games like that in the playoffs?
Especially because, see, you say at the beginning of the year it wasn't about winning games. When they were 11-14 with Capella hurt, with Chris Paul
I mean, they were just trying to survive.
Right. At that point, it became about survival, and then they started thriving. They had the best record in the NBA post-All-Star break, or the best record in the Western Conference. They were playing at a super high level that way.
As was Harden, who was unbelievable.
Right. I said Harden would have gotten my fake MVP vote. He's probably going to finish second in the MVP voting that we're going to find out here in a few weeks. So I think it became out of necessity because it wasn't a drastically different style than what they had played the year before. It was that style on steroids. It was that style taken to its furthest logical conclusion of, well, if it's good 30% of the time, what about 50% of the time? But I think heated exchange can be taken up a number of different ways. From what I understand, this was not a falling out of players. This was frustration between two guys that lost a game that nobody thought they were going to lose. Nobody thought people thought they were going to lose the Warriors. They didn't think they were going to lose that game. Game 6 in Houston, 8-point favorites, no Kevin Durant, all of that. And so, but Chris Paul has to take some ownership on this. Game 5 was a golden opportunity in that series, and he was terrible. He was not good in that series until Game 6. Additionally, Chris Paul was not traded to Houston with a 5-year contract. He was traded to Houston with 1 year left on his deal. And he signed, he took that money, and God bless him for taking that money, to play next to James Harden, knowing you were going to get at least a version of this. Maybe not as extreme as it got, but a version of this. And up until the end of Game 5 of the Western Conference semifinals, it had led to winning. It had led to them dominating in the first round, climbing all the way to where they were almost the 2 seed in the West until the final 2 days of the season, and being tied 2 games apiece against Golden State, feeling like they could have won Game 1. So I understand Chris Paul's frustration because the clock is ticking on him as far as his ability to finally make an NBA Finals, but I think it's a little revisionist history to act as if the reason the Rockets didn't advance was on James Harden, as opposed to the reason they got even close to where they were was because of James Harden.
I will agree with that 100%. I also think we know Chris Paul, the competitor he is. I don't, to your point, think you read that much into the fact that they lost. The season ended. You would expect this. You would hope for this. The guys would be upset, and I think both of those guys are very close with one another. So in many cases, you feel comfortable airing some of your issues that you feel like you need to improve upon. But I do think just the bigger picture for this Houston team is what do they do going forward? Because I think Daryl Morey did an extraordinary job in recalibrating the roster, making some changes, whether it was throughout the course of the season or heading into the season. I mean, going into the season, I never would have told you I thought Houston would be better this past season than they were the previous one. And they were a better group in how they played. Now it's just about, do you entirely retool the way in which you play?
Well, they also understand that Chris Paul, he can only play so much defense. He's not the great defender that he was. He is not the dominant scorer that he was. He's not the playmaker that he was. So there's a certain amount of his reality at this stage of his career. The last 2 years, he's missed 2 great opportunities against the Warriors, which I believe is him and Harden's worst matchup, going against Steph and Clay, because they exhaust you on the defensive end, and they have had success, Steph and Clay, going against Harden and Chris Paul. So Daryl Morey, I got a lot of confidence in him, but man, he's going to have to do an amazing job, better than the one he did last year, because last year he did a great job getting them back to this point.
You don't think they're close? You don't think they've come closer than any other team?
Oh, they've come closer than any other team.
Not a whole retool?
No, well, listen, I think at this point there's a bit of a mental block against this basketball team. When you're up 3-2 and, yeah, you're up 15 in Game 6 and you lose, and then you're up 15 at home in Game 7 and you miss 27 straight threes and you lose, and then you get the gift, the ostensible gift of a Kevin Durant injury, and then all of a sudden you blow that fourth quarter, which was an opportunity to go up 3-2 again, and then you have a Game 6 at home and you blow that game, even though you have a lead, I believe, going into the fourth quarter. There's an element of, man, we just can't, and sports, a lot of sports are psychological, an element of we just can't beat these guys. But I'm going to say a name that won't come up on most of these conversations. That was a much bigger problem for the Rockets in this series than their highest paid player, James Harden, or their second highest paid player, Chris Paul. The third guy they near maxed out, Clint Capella. They paid Clint Capella on what he was showing he would be after the 2018 season. He was miserable in their biggest series of the year. The Rockets don't have a lot of room to retool. They don't have a lot of cap space. Daryl always tries to stay flexible, but they don't have a lot of super tradable assets aside from their own picks, and those will be late picks. What they need is Clint Capella to be the player they think he can be, which he was not in that series. That was as big of a reason they lost as any.
All right, Sarah, stick around. Coming up, how did the Raptors stun the Bucks? Next on First Things First.
Whew, that was a game.